Welcome to the Neurostimulation Podcast. I'm Michael Passmore, Clinical Associate Professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. The Neurostimulation Podcast is all about exploring the fascinating world of neuroscience, clinical neurostimulation, interventional mental health, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, various approaches to helping to improve wellness and various approaches to helping to improve health and wellness. We look at the latest research breakthroughs and we talk to people in the field that are pushing the boundaries of what can be done to help improve people. We talk about the latest research breakthroughs and how that research is being translated into real-world treatments that can improve health and well-being. We also talk about leaders in the industry that are helping to develop these interesting technologies and approaches to improve health and well-being. This podcast is separate from my clinical and academic roles and is part of my personal effort to bring neuroscience education to the general public. So I would like to emphasize that the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical guidance. Today I had a great discussion with Ben Couch. Ben is a coach, a teacher, an entrepreneur, and he has a fascinating story about bringing two seemingly disparate worlds together. That is his experience and passion in the martial arts with helping to provide the best care possible for individuals who need extra help in care facilities. For instance, clients, patients, residents suffering from various forms of dementia like Alzheimer's disease or other types of conditions that require them to live in facilities where they need the extra help that caregivers are providing for them. And so I think you're going to really appreciate this conversation because Ben brings a real heart for care and innovation to help to improve the lives of not only the people that are being cared for, but also the caregivers and the entire body of he's helping not only improve the lives of the people being cared for, but also the caregivers and the entire institutional, not only the people being cared for, but the caregivers and the entire institutional network. And he's just got a really positive and innovative vision that I think will be really interesting for you to hear about. So please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Neurostimulation Podcast. Today I'm joined by someone who brings together two worlds that rarely speak to each other, martial arts and modern healthcare. Ben Couch is a martial artist, a healthcare educator, and a dementia specialist who has spent more than 40 years studying how the body moves and how it gets injured. After directing national training efforts for watermark retirement communities for over 2 decades, Ben recognized something that most healthcare systems were missing. Traditional ergonomics training wasn't protecting caregivers or patients nearly enough. Drawing on black belts in 8 martial arts disciplines, can't believe that, including a 7th degree black belt in karate, Ben developed Eastern Ergonomics, a program that applies martial arts principles like balance, efficiency, and structure to patient transfers to enhance dementia care. Today, through his company, ElumenEd, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are. Good job.
ElumenEd, and we'll get the spelling and we'll put all the info on Ben's company in the show notes. Ben's training nurses, CNAs, and dementia professionals across North America, helping to reduce injuries, burnout, and apprehension, fear at the bedside, while improving dignity and safety for clients and patients. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be a fascinating talk about movement, caregiving, injury prevention, and bringing in what ancient wisdom can still teach modern medicine and approaches to healthcare. Ben, welcome to the show. Really happy that you're here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Mike.
Super. Yeah, well, maybe you can start by introducing yourself, telling us a bit about your background, just so that viewers and listeners can get to know you.
Yeah. So like you said, I've been doing martial arts for over 40 years. And that was the best birthday present I ever got. When I was 8 years old, I'd been begging And in those days, that was 1984. There wasn't a place on every corner. And my parents finally conceded. And 40 plus years later, I'm still going. Like you said, I've got a really broad experience after all those years. I've studied a lot of different arts, and I've been very lucky in my teachers, even at the ranks I've gotten. I've worked with some really world-class individuals who have studied the body in systems that are hundreds of years old. And one of the things that I look at is when we look at ergonomics and body mechanics, this was literally life and death. This was something that they studied with the intensity of knowing that if they were wrong, there was no forgiving that in terms of their own lifespan. So that we see in the old arts a really fascinating focus on that, a scientific approach to it that we might not expect from just watching the movies about those times. There's a real need, a very pressing need, more so than in a lab or in a study. Their study was their lives. So I've gotten to work as I've progressed and gotten to meet more people. I've gotten to work in older and older systems that have studied the body in ways that just aren't really seen very often. And just like a professional athlete in powerlifting or running or basketball, the study of the movement on a very fine level is just something that, for whatever reason, I'm a very technical martial artist. I've been interested in how the body works and how the body moves and how the mind moves the body, and how our inborn instincts are often not the best movements that we can make. The things that we go to reflexively out of instinct, much like fight, flight, or freeze, it protects the species, but it doesn't protect necessarily you. It's right enough times that the species survives, but the individual, through a very dedicated study of what actually is the most efficient way to do things, gets a much more targeted approach to their own safety. So oddly enough, in my own background, I actually, in 2001, was teaching martial arts, and one of my students was the person who became the CEO of Watermark Retirement Communities. And they had kind of a mantra of find the right person and then create the job. So the person I was working with, David Barnes, he was looking for a trainer, and they had just finished a study showing how much turnover they had, and they decided we need a solid training program. I was finishing up my master's degree in literature, so he knew I was a writer and he'd seen me teach, and he said, "Why don't you interview?" And that went from 2001 until I became the national director of training, and ultimately I stayed there until 2025, and finally broke off to form ElumenEd, and just had an amazing experience. And I think because I was not an industry professional, the experience that I had was I sat down and David brought in the national directors one by one and said, teach him the business. Here's the director of nursing. Okay, tell him how to teach everybody, including yourself. So I got to learn every position in the company from the national directors over the course of about a year. And it was a really amazing experience. I feel really just so lucky to have had that experience with that company. And then in 2022, my own mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and of course, a crushing blow. And it was a moment where I realized I knew the technical aspects of it, and I knew how to deal with it as a professional. But personally, it was a completely new experience. It was, I know all the moves. It's like martial arts. You know all the moves, and then Mike Tyson has the famous quote, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And that was my punch in the face. And I realized there was a lot to learn on a much more emotional, psychological level, that, but I really, as much as I knew, I really botched it a few times, and it was a hard learning process. So that's a little bit of my background in a nutshell.
Yeah, thanks for explaining all of that. I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I mean, these personal experiences are devastating, as you say, but on the other hand, hopefully we can take personal challenges and bring that into improving the lives of others in some way. There's some solace there, hopefully. But yeah, so I mean, it's fascinating, that connection between the ancient wisdom of movement and the specific focus in on the technicalities of purposeful movement that martial arts teaches us, and how we can, again, bring that ancient wisdom into helping with providing care and for reducing injuries in caregivers and for making the care better for those who are receiving the care. So I was just curious, what would you say would be some of the important points that you found after the 20 years of your experience there, as you were describing, in terms of maybe the gaps that standard ergonomics programs or the traditional approach to caregiving was lacking, and that maybe the martial arts wisdom was able to sort of supplement or improve along those lines?
I think the first aspect of it, to kind of do a deep dive for me, is the mental aspect of it at the corporate level. It's been the number one cause of injury, specifically transferring patients, so helping them stand up or sit down or move from chair to toilet, or helping people move who have a hard time moving. Been the number one cause of injury for healthcare workers since well before I was in the industry. And the thing is, we've added gadgets, we've added machinations, there's Hoyer lifts and all these things that they're great. I'm not knocking them, but in reality, when you talk to an actual caregiver instead of the risk manager who bought it, you talk to them and you say, well, yeah, but it's on the other floor, and I've got to get through all these residents in an hour, or so-and-so called in sick today, or the person who was trained on it, they're not here anymore. And so despite all that, I think we've relied on that in a emerging tech world to save us. And the reality is that a lot of it is not happening. In some places it is, probably as we get more toward the skilled nursing and the hospital environments, but it's still number one. And you ask yourself, have we just accepted this? Have we just accepted that that's the way it is? Because what I saw is we'd have our annual required in services, and this is sort of across the board. This is something I want to just eradicate across the board. Everyone comes in because we all just accept that this is what it is. For an hour a month, you are going to be bored, sitting in a room, getting nothing out of it except a check mark from the state. And I think, what I saw was there's just this acceptance of it in the industry that we're going to do this training, and that's a big part of my background. To me, if you don't change something, then you didn't train. So how many hours and dollars are we throwing away every year in terms of that? I mean, that's just a focused mindset on you go to martial arts class, you do the same thing for 15 years and you're not progressing. Well, why? Is it the teacher? Is it your own attitude? Is it you're not often enough? And a lot of the time it's our own effort. And I think that's the trend across a lot of, I'm not knocking anyone, it's just what we fall into kind of naturally. So that's my kind of rant on the subject. I think the first thing is, as a martial arts teacher and as a trainer, I bring the same idea. We have to change something. If we're going to sit down and spend that time and money, then something has to be different at the end. And we're in this space where nothing is different at the end. Physically, the actual physics of it, I think we have, and I'm drawing with a broad brush here, but I think a lot of movement in the West is really geared toward what I call playing connect the dots without any lines. We talk about, you can look up the National Institutes of Health guidelines for training. Put your hands on the gait belt, bring the person to you. Well, how? We talk about those dots, but we don't talk about how we connect them with those transitional movements. How do I actually do that? Which muscles do I activate? And it's just something that we don't dig into the actual body. We have these very blanket standard, and again, you're doing a national training program, it has to be pretty standardized, but
Mm.
We don't really go beyond keep it close to your center, lift with your legs, use the gate. Well, when I bring the person to me, how do I do that?
Mm.
It's a really simple example. When someone's in a chair and I'm lifting them to a standing position, our bodies want to use our biceps and our deltoids. That goes back to that instinctual behavior, works for the species, but in individual practice, those are really weak muscles. And
Mhm.
if we look at that carefully, we can see, well, why are we getting all the shoulder injuries? Why are we getting all the lower back injuries? It's all tied to that. That's one of the main factors for that. So if we look at it and we say, martial arts principle, hands always push. Well, even when they come back to you, they still push. And our brains go, well, how can that be? Well, it's the same movement that if you're doing in the weight room, you're doing a bicep curl, you can go so far. If you're doing a bench press, you can go a lot farther, okay, because we're activating different muscles. So if I'm doing a rowing motion where I'm pushing back with my elbows instead of trying to curl them to me, suddenly I've activated my triceps, my lats, my trapezius muscles. Those are those things that in that transition moment, people never get hurt when they put their hands on the gate belt. They don't get hurt when the person's up to them. They get hurt when they're moving.
Mm.
That's one of the things martial arts really excels at, because yeah, the punchline is important, but how the heck do I get there when I've got someone who really doesn't want me to? I've really got to hone my actual transition movements to make things work. One teacher I worked with said, I can teach you all the throws, the locks in a year. Teach
Mm.
you how to get those to work. Teaching you how to get to that end point, that transition movement, will take me 10 years to teach you. And that's what I think we've lost a lot in the West.
Mm. Yeah, it's super interesting. It makes me think about coaching specialist Nick Winkelman, I think is the name, and he kind of has this idea about using a lot of visualization around coaching athletes to imagine that they're, for example, if someone's getting ready to leap, just imagine that they're actually a spring, and just picturing themselves as a spring jumping, or for runners, like the first few steps. So you're I don't know, shooting out of a cannon, and then for the next few steps of the sprint, then you imagine that you're running up a steep hill. So just getting sort of a real sense of a visualization into. I wonder if that could be part of the answer in terms of the lines that are between the dots that you're helping to coach these caregivers into getting into the habit of performing movements in a safer way.
Yeah, I think so. I think the mindset is really critical. When I start with caregivers, again, you go to every training ever, and it starts with hands on the gate belt. I start, okay, you're about to walk in the room. And how is your mind? How is your posture? If your posture is lousy, you're already starting with a collapsing building. Before you ever do anything, how is your posture? And that's, again, something that I just don't see addressed. And I think certainly I've gotten yelled at for years, get your chin up, get your back straight, because as soon as those are compromised, you are compromised. Your whole balance system is done. So I think that visualization at the beginning is important. And things like commitment and to the technique. In the sword world, they will say, as soon as the sword leaves the scabbard, or the saya in Japanese, the fight is complete. Because from that point on, your mind is on the other side of it. You have just committed fully. And I not to get too esoteric with it, but just having the right mindset going in, the right posture, the right idea that, and this is something that is desperately lacking, I think, in healthcare. Take a second,
Mm.
be aware of what you're about to do. Don't let it be the same. I've done this 50 times today, because the 51st is where you get injured. It's like you're most likely to have an accident close to home where you're unaware, you're used to it. And I think that mental awareness that comes from the idea that before I walk in the room, I am transferring the person, because it has to start here. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. What are some common strategies then in terms of just preparing caregivers, helping them to get into the right mindset, I suppose? Is there Yeah, can you give us some examples or just walk us through some of the principles that you tend to teach when you're coaching, that type of thing?
Absolutely. So posture is actually the first thing. So one of the pieces that I've put together just kind of in my own head over the years, because just personally I've struggled a lot. I've had a lot of depression in my life, pretty serious. And one of the things I started to notice over the years is it never happened when I was at the dojo. It never happened after I left. I was always happy. And it started to dawn on me that we always try to fix our minds. And one of the ways to do that is to fix our bodies. It goes both ways.
Mhm.
So I tell people it's not just for your physical body. You fix your posture and your brain gets right too. That's one of the first things that you can do when you go in. That little pause, take a pause, look at your posture. How are you doing? Go into it with that attitude. I tell people it's real hard to be in a terrible mood or to lack confidence when you just fix your posture, because that sends your brain a different signal. Kind of like having a smile on when you don't feel good. You're trying to hotwire your brain into following your body.
Mhm.
So the next thing I look at in preparation is breathing. How are we setting up our body with the correct breathing to activate the core muscles and again, if we're breathing right, that feeds into our posture, it feeds into our attitude and our bodies, and carries through into the actual transfer. Again, just like a weightlifter or any athlete has to have their breathing right to perform at their peak. So those are two of the pieces that I look at front and center. The problem to me with the mental concept and telling people, okay, focus on this, and it's easy to logically comprehend things. It's easy to, I can understand a lot of things I can't do. Maybe I can understand how Carl Lewis is so fast on the sprints. I can't do that, but I can think about it a lot. However, if I want to go out and sprint, I need to, again, fix my body, fix my brain. And one of the best ways to do that is actually getting into the body. I can't be thinking about what somebody else is doing. I can't be thinking about balancing my checkbook. I have to be very present in my body. So to me, the posture and the breathing, you go through meditative traditions. That's one of the first things you address in virtually any meditation in the world, your posture and your breathing.
Mhm.
And I've also practiced Zen for over 20 years now. And that's, in some schools, that's virtually all of it. Fix your posture, fix your breathing, and sit there. And there's something that comes from that to me is a little bit, I don't mean like metaphysically necessarily, but it's deeper than something that you can think about. And to me, just I don't when I train, I don't have people do meditation or anything like that, but just fixing the posture and the breathing to me is the perfect intro. And then actually getting them to just stand still for a minute. It's a struggle for me. I'm always going. So every day when I sit down and meditate, the first little bit is like dragging myself to the cushion in my own head. I'm sitting there, but I'm not there. So getting people to just stop and pause, fix that posture, fix that breathing, and mentally just say to yourself, I'm about to do a transfer, instead of just going in thinking about what you're cooking your kids for dinner tonight. And just being there is, to me, and posture and breath is the way to get there, I think.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I have a meditation practice as well. I've been doing Vipassana for many years, and the Zen kind of approach also. And it makes me think of the idea of encouraging people to have a simple mantra in that moment of the
Yes.
preparation. It only takes a few seconds. And the other thing it makes me think, because I do a lot of late life mental health, and I go to seniors care facilities multiple times weekly. And it makes me also think that when a caregiver takes that few seconds to have the mindset, give themselves a bit of a mantra, and attend to their presence and the breath and the posture, there's probably an effect on the client, the patient as well, right? I mean, there's this sort of
Oh, yeah.
body language that there's a lot of stuff that gets communicated non-verbally and unconsciously that probably factors into the difficulties that may arise as a result of the person with dementia perhaps being less afraid or feeling as though they're being less rushed or any of those kinds of things.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the big fears that people express when they move in to a retirement community, a skilled nurse. Will I be dropped? So it's not just the caregivers who are worrying about that. That's the people, and that's another thing I like to emphasize, is that this is not lifting a box. It's a completely different thing, and it requires your attention. Not just for your own physical presence, but for the person that you're doing this for. They need to know that you are focused on them. And it definitely changes the tenor of things when we stop treating it like I'm making widgets and we start treating it like I'm intervening to improve the quality of a human being's life. And it's an unfortunate truth about humans that we get used to something and then we stop paying attention to it. And if we want, I think most people go into healthcare with great intentions. I think they like to help people. And when we go into it with that presence, then that's a really powerful thing that the residents, I believe, truly respond to. But maintaining that, I think sometimes the newest people who are forced to pay the most attention if they want to be successful are in some ways the best, not the best caregivers, but the best at creating that bond with people. There's a quote I won't get quite right, but it's from Shunryu Suzuki, who was a Zen teacher, who says, in the beginner's mind, there are endless possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are very few. Because the expert knows the answers, and that limits us. And I think when you have a caregiver going in with that fresh attitude, the question is, how can we be? One of the mottos of one of the really old schools that I've worked with is new heart every day. How do we create a new heart every day for what we do? And certainly none of us is ever 100% successful at that, but it's something I try to keep out in front of myself, and to whatever extent I can pass on to other people.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that by itself would be an ideal mantra, even just going into a transfer or just anything that a caregiver is doing from hour to hour and day to day. Yeah, that's fantastic, because I think part of it is that, and it strikes me that there's a disruptive, in a way, in a positive way, a disruptive component. It strikes me that bringing two seemingly disparate worlds together, that being martial arts and caregiving for folks in a retirement home, it's not the sort of thing that you think typically would go hand in hand, but it certainly does, no pun intended. But so maybe, that I'm just curious, in your experience, if the extent to which that those two worlds are not typically associated together in people's minds when they see, oh yeah, these do really go together well, and if there's a disruptive kind of approach that kind of shakes people out of their usual habits and routines, as you're saying, which has become, as in most bureaucracies, you get this kind of capture and sort of rigidity that's difficult to shake apart and to improve on. Yeah, have you found that bringing those martial arts ideas is something that catches people's attention and helps to disrupt their unhealthy habits and all of that kind of the legacy kind of bureaucracy that gets in the way?
That's a really interesting question. It's been, so when I had my lightning bolt moment and said, whoa, I've got something that other people aren't doing. I've got something that really can help. I asked myself, are people going to hear this and think this is wacko? This is what we're doing, martial arts to train. And I've been very pleasantly surprised that people are fascinated. I've mentioned this I've been networking for 6 or 8 months on this now, and people have been really genuinely excited, because I think in at least, and one of the things I found is, and not surprisingly, smaller companies are more willing to take the jump, more willing to be innovative. And it doesn't hurt that it's easier to get in and just meet very easily with a local executive director or CEO. But even the larger groups that I've talked with one of the issues I'm running into is this is totally new. I thought there must be other people doing something like this. And the closest I found is someone in Japan who's doing a slightly similar thing. So you go to a larger place and they sense it. They sense there's something here, but where's the 10 years of research? And so that's been something that I found the companies that are smaller that are looking to disrupt the industry themselves are really intrigued by this. I think the larger, more national companies will be as the buzz raises, but I've been very interested to see that even the folks who I've talked to who are like national risk managers have said, let's keep talking about this. So I think there is that sense of shakeup when someone comes with something truly different and says it doesn't have to be like this. Not like anyone has consciously said, well, this is just the way it is. But I think bringing that to the table lets them see that's what they did. It lets them see like, wait, there's something else. There's something that could maybe disrupt. And this is a trend that everyone would like to disrupt because these injuries are remarkably expensive. Replace a nurse, the stats I found are between $40,000 and $120,000 to replace a nurse from one single injury. And it's just kind of a budget line item we've come to expect. And for someone to say, we don't necessarily have to do that. There are other ways of looking at this problem has been something that's been really exciting to me to see people interested in. So yeah, it's been a fascinating set of conversations I've had, and I think the potential is intriguing to a lot of people who just thought there was no other way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Innovation is the word that I was kind of struggling for. So I think it's definitely innovative. It makes me wonder if also that there would be many people on the academic side, nursing academics and even healthcare administration academics that would be interested in collaborating and studying the positive effects of this kind of thing.
Yeah, at the moment, that's something I haven't pursued yet. It's on my to-do list. I think of the physical therapists I've talked to, there's been a lot of interest there. I'm trying to get some collaborations going with them to see their side of the puzzle and how they conceive these movements, and kind of I'm hopeful that we can get some back and forth education of each other going on. But one of the things that I've really found there is that a lot of the fundamental concepts, I think honestly powerlifters are maybe the closest, because they have to, again, they are lifting and it's very dangerous. So they have to be so attuned to how their bodies work. So a lot of the breathing, a lot of the posture, those things are present there. And so I'm fascinated to get in with some folks who are doing other disciplines. I've got a very deep bench on my martial arts of people who I work with, but stepping outside that room has been really interesting so far.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm just curious then, in terms of the martial arts background, are there certain, I mean, you've already mentioned certain principles, but like as far as something specific, like say for patient transfers, are there specific disciplines or principles that, aside from just the introductory mindset with the posture and the breath, can you just explain a little bit about maybe some key principles that translate most directly to safer patient transfers?
Certainly. A lot of the most important movement for me has been out of Japanese jiu-jitsu, which is, most people think Brazilian jiu-jitsu now, which is mostly a ground-based system. I think it's reasonably fair to say, but most of Japanese jiu-jitsu is a standing jiu-jitsu. Typically, you didn't want to be with swords in play. You didn't want to be rolling around on the ground with someone. So that movement's been very influential to me, and a big part of that is moving from the center of gravity. So when I do transfers, like I talk about, that's a principle. We're pushing with our hands all the time, but the more I move with my center of gravity, the less I have to do that. So one of the pieces I really like to talk about is kind of, as difficult to explain without touching people, but adhering to someone. So it's like I'm stuck to them, and I just get in my position and I move my center. So I'm not yanking, I'm not twisting I'm moving my center of gravity, and I'm always keeping them in my front. So you see people pivot and they twist their waists. Well, when I do a pivot, I'm always shuffling with them and keeping my center in line with them. Things like that. It doesn't let a 100-pound nurse lift a 350-pound person. I don't want to give people the impression that they shouldn't be careful, or that precautions need to be taken no matter what. But those things allow you to work at your body's maximum efficiency. So moving with the center of gravity, it's maybe the most fundamental concept of any martial art. And then pieces about balance are really important as well. So the other, and again, we study this a lot in jiu-jitsu, where is our weak spot? Where's our weak spot in balance? Well, we've always got an equilateral triangle in front of us and behind us. And the third point in that triangle out in front of us and behind us is always our weakest point. And we call that triangulating the balance. So when you see caregivers square up, put their feet side by side and bend over, you're going into your weakest point of balance. So when you pick someone up, you are more likely to lose your balance forward, or if they lose their balance coming toward you, to fall backwards. And in both cases, typically both of you go down. If we shift our stance, we never get rid of our triangulation point unless we're using an assistive device. But if we just shift our stance to the side, we take that balance point out of the equation. So now if I'm bladed in my stance with 1 foot forward and 1 back, I'm bringing into my structure rather than bringing into a place where there's no structure. Pieces like that in the jiu-jitsu world, that's key, because if you lose track of that, you lose. In the world of caregiving and transfers, if you lose track of that, again, someone gets injured. So those are some key principles that I like to emphasize. And it's fixing your feet is easy. Moving with the center, elements like that, I feel very lucky that I've got about 25 years teaching experience as well, because when I started doing this, I already had a lot of ways to express what I was talking about, because I've been showing students how to do that for a long time. So bringing it down into simpler terms for someone who's not a martial artist has not been, thankfully, too difficult for me. I imagine myself trying to do this 15 years ago, and it would have been so much harder, just because my students have taught me so much about the process. So those are some points it's easy enough to talk about without touching people, but that's another thing that is really important, is feel. I don't teach this class. I will do follow-up and coaching online, but if you want me to teach this class, I have to be there in person, because we have to feel what the other person's doing. It's not something you can learn like you and I are right now.
Yeah, I can imagine, for sure. I'll have to talk to some of the administrators and nursing leaders in some of the retirement homes that I go provide care at, and see if they'd be interested. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by the approach, and I'll try and encourage them to get in touch with you and see if we can bring some of these techniques up into our facilities in Vancouver here.
I'd love to talk to them. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. It's also interesting to me. I mean, there's such a broad range of different types of martial arts, obviously, but in particular, I was noticing that in your work, you're referencing Tai Chi principles like softness, flow, and minimal effort. So I'm curious how those particular ideas show up practically in your training.
Yes. So first off, I'll just kind of go in order. So softness. When we think about, if I took my coffee mug here and dropped it on the ground, it would shatter because it's very brittle. That's when we tense our muscles and we firm up and we take the slack out of them. That's what I try to do to people who I want to throw on the ground. I try to make them tense up and try to take the slack out, because that gives me a handle to work with. They're brittle now. So little gruesome, but something that's brittle, I can break. If you take a piece of rope and drop it on the ground, no problem, because it's flexible and it just, bleh, no problem. It's, again, a key principle of jujitsu is that you're using the person's energy against them. And if they're a glass, there's a lot of energy to go with. If they're a rope, there's no attack anymore. So, for someone who's trying to execute a technique, you want to be very flexible, very soft. And that, again, that goes back to moving from the center. If I'm not deadlifting someone, if I'm not curling someone, then that allows me to stay soft and loose and pliable. It allows me to adjust. And one thing that we don't like to do in martial arts is to totally commit to something, because if it goes wrong, then the other person has the upper hand. So as we go in with softness, we can adjust, we can move, and it goes back to the flow now. So let's say I start to bring someone up and their knee goes out and they start to shift. Well, now I can flow and adjust. If I'm so committed to the path of movement that I've described or that I have set in my own mind and I'm rigid, then when they go wrong, I'm already tense. There goes my back. If I'm flexible and I have that flow, I can shift my center of gravity instead of tightening my muscles and causing that tension that causes pulls and sprains. When I'm soft, I can adjust and I don't have to panic. There's that moment where you feel everything go wrong and you can tell. It's like you're about to, you just realized that you're about to have a car accident and there's no stopping it. That moment where it all goes wrong. If you're flexible and your mind is present, then you can adjust and hopefully protect the person and yourself, especially if you have structured up beforehand in a way that's safest. So again, from the mental to the physical, those aspects really help. And then from the physical perspective, if your body is structured correctly, you can be soft and flowing. There's a lot of powerful movement in that, more so than when you're tense. You can transfer energy more effectively when you're soft than when you're tense. Whether it's coming to you or allowing the person to sit back down, it's more controlled. And that's when we try to control with muscle. Then if the person's too big, too heavy, too anything, or sometimes people resist in their care. They push away. They don't want you to pick them up. Okay, then we'll sit back down. But if that happens and I'm so committed to where I'm going and they push and I wrench and I'm rigid, and that's where the injuries happen. So I think those concepts, and I'm not, and my karate teacher was also a Tai Chi teacher, so I picked up pieces of that, but I'm much more studied in the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which relies on a lot of the similar concepts. So I think those two arts have really influenced a lot of how I think about moving people, which is, again, going back to like how our lizard brain sort of evolved. We have the Hulk smash mentality, and if it's not working, I'm just going to pull harder, push harder, smash through it. Where when we're looking at, and again, for the species, that may be what works, but for us individually, that's how we get hurt. So if we can retrain those to be more effective, that's what would separate the foot soldiers from the elites. The foot soldiers hand them a sword and good luck, where the elites would study and practice for years and years and years, and they would kind of master their minds than their bodies and stand a better chance because their mechanics were correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, what kind of feedback are you getting from caregivers, facilities that you've been working with in terms of follow-up and how have things been going in terms of how the program is received? How has that been going for you?
It's been, again, you put something out there and you hope, and it has been very well received. I've been really unexpected feedback on it that has just been overwhelmingly positive. I've worked with caregivers, and you go in and say with anybody, I'm doing stuff that a lot of my martial artists has taken me 10 years to get them there. But that's with someone trying to punch them while they're doing it. This is, and providing resistance and all these things. But when you're helping someone who's compliant, I've been really pleased to see that I've been able to teach these principles in a day. And then to come back and have people say that really worked for me, that was a lot easier. I tried it with this person, has been really gratifying. And one of the other things that I stress with them as a teaching tool to try to get over some of the complexity is I don't try to teach for every position. I say it's principle based. It's not position based. So virtually all of my training is from a seated to standing and standing to seated position. That's what we do because it covers all of the principles. And at the end of the day, I'll say, well, throw me some curveballs. What's something you run into? And I've had people toss out some things that I say, well, I haven't run into that one. Let's look at it. So we'll get in position and I'll say, okay, what principles can we use? Okay, well, the person's lying down, and what I do is I try to get one hand and I'll take them by the shoulder and pick them up. And I say, okay, can we reposition that so you can get around the body and push them up? Oh yeah. And to start thinking in those terms. So getting people into that mode where they're, again, it's the pause. I go in and, oh geez, I haven't seen this before. Better just yank. No, take the pause. Okay, how do I get my balance right in this position? And caregivers have responded really well to that. And the people who I've trained, like I've trained several like owners of home health agencies, for instance, have just picked that up really quickly and said, like, this is pretty amazing. Like, I never knew I could move people like this. So it's been very exciting to see. You see that moment where the eyes light up and they go, oh. And it's been exciting because it's the same one that I see in my karate students' faces when I do something and they suddenly get it. And, oh, and that's a wonderful moment as a teacher.
Yeah, fantastic. It makes me also think that perhaps the next level challenge would be for those residents and clients who do have cognitive impairment and they maybe don't understand the importance of the need for help. They're defaulting back, living in the past, so to speak, defaulting back to thinking that they can manage their own personal care, but in fact they can't. And so then they are in fact somewhat resistive. And so there are these, I'm sure you're aware, these strategies like gentle persuasive approach. So I'm sure that your kind of approach, the next level, would be also helpful for those kinds of challenging situations for caregivers and residents as well.
Yeah, the communication, because that's another, I'm really focusing in on the ergonomics right now, but I've spent a lot of time teaching the communication as well. And it's the transition of doing something in the worst case scenario to someone, in a better scenario doing something for someone, and in my world, in the best scenario, doing something with someone. So communicating what's up. Hey, is it okay with you if we go to breakfast right now? Oh, we're gonna redirect. We're gonna do all these things to include, and for me, everything goes back to martial arts. It's my life. So when you're doing really classical jiu-jitsu, it's critical that both sides are engaged and fully engaged. And one of the interesting pieces that you don't see in the modern arts is that the side that is the teaching side is the senior side. So the person who's being thrown is the person who's on the teaching side, because they have to feel the movement so much more completely than the person who's doing it, because they are feeling the movement being done to them and then guiding the person through it. Sometimes even without the person knowing it, correcting the move on the way. And to me, that's another important approach. The person who we are assisting, the person receiving the technique of the transfer, is the one who should be teaching us. They teach us their movement, and then we respond to that by kind of showing them where to go with our movement. And so that mutuality, it's so easy to get into the space that I'm doing a transfer. We're doing a transfer. Me and the person it's a two-person affair.
Mhm.
So if we don't include them in that, and if we don't communicate what's happening, and to me, I don't care if the person's not even able to verbally communicate, I'm still talking. We're still going through things, and I'm still asking permission,
Right.
and I'm still looking at facial expressions and allowing that person to guide the process as much as humanly possible. And that's where, I deal a lot with the mechanics, obviously, but the the heart of
Mhm.
the process has to be the person we're assisting, has to be the person we're performing this transfer on them. They're receiving the transfer, and their body is communicating to us. They are teaching us how to move them.
Yeah.
And they're the important side. They're the teaching side. They show us.
Mhm.
We're not doing it to them. We're doing it with them, and they are guiding us. Whether even if in extreme dementia, in late stage Alzheimer's, say, that person is still there. That person is still guiding. And even if they're not doing it with intention or even super present, we can be really present with what their body is telling us.
Mhm.
So that communication, to me, that mutuality, is something that, again, if we don't have that beginner's mind, we start to just do stuff to people.
Mhm.
And that's one of the differences in adequate care versus exceptional care, is that in our minds, the person stays there. They
Mhm.
don't become a box over time or
Mhm.
a sack of rice that we're picking up. They're a human being who we are communicating with. When I transfer them, they are transferring with me. We are sharing this experience, and
Mhm.
they have to talk to me, even if it's just physically, and I have to listen. One of the pieces of healthcare that I think is really lacking is the listening. And
Mhm.
I think there's a chaos in the insurance companies and the trepidation and the waiting periods. And I mean, it's really difficult to put oneself in the hands of another.
Yeah.
And if there's not a space to be heard in that, my wife went in and had a doctor's appointment and about something she was very concerned about. And the doctor he was trying, but he just couldn't, his ears didn't work. And he
Mhm.
could see this is causing real grief and fear and sadness. And if I just took 1 second and let her talk and really listen. So, how are we accomplishing that for people with dementia? How are we
Yeah.
understanding them as humans?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a really beautiful and eloquent way of explaining that. So I really appreciate it for sure. And I mean, I think it just speaks to the immense value that your approach is bringing to this industry. And so I was curious. So if you were to think ahead in the next 5, 10 years with ongoing buy-in and incorporation of these approaches that Eastern Ergonomics and ElumenEd offers, what would you say if you were to kind of, if you had your wish list kind of thing, how would healthcare look different 5 or 10 years from now with these kinds of approaches having been more implemented in a more widespread manner?
I mean, the easy one is reduction in injuries. I have a very lofty goal of taking transfer injuries off the top of the list for the first time in forever for healthcare workers. I would really like people to be safer. What comes along with that is more money in the budget for things that are meaningful for residents, hopefully things that are more meaningful for the people who work there. That's a lot of money we could free up to do a lot of good. So I would love to see that happen. Beyond that, in a more soft focus, I guess I would say that I would love to see people embracing better structures. I would like to see people re-examine the assumptions that we have about healthcare. There's a lot of people with great theory that doesn't meet the floor. There's a lot of things out there that I would like to be one example saying, look, it's actually more affordable, more engaging. it reduces turnover, it keeps your staff safe, and it keeps them actually happy because you show that you care. And by doing that, they stay. Like, who loses? Who loses here? You save a ton of money, your staff stays on in the middle of a caregiver crisis where people are leaving the profession, baby boomers are entering the market. I mean, we're in trouble. So you want to keep your people? Here's how. Here's a way. So how can we do more things like that? What else are we assuming without realizing the things we don't know? What things are we assuming can't be fixed because we just haven't seen anything different? And can we look at those things? I would love to see that attitude breakthrough. I know there's a real core of healthcare professionals who are working in that attitude, in that space, who are breaking down those barriers of what we've just accepted has to be. I'm lucky I got to work at one of those companies for a long, long time. And I want to encourage the challenging of that. I see my mom has lived in a few different memory cares now. And one was okay. One was not so good. And the one she's in now is exceptionally, unbelievably wonderful. She has, I've seen light in her eyes I never thought I would see again, because they don't accept that this is how it has to be. Yes, there's Alzheimer's disease. We're at this stage in medical progress. We're not coming back from that. But she's alive again in a way that I thought was gone, because they don't accept that your life is over. And is that an assumption we have? Oh, you have Alzheimer's disease, it's done, we're just waiting now. And that's awful. I mean, that's a living person who still has wants and needs and sorrows and joys. And one of the a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things I've found, my mother's a lifelong musician, and she was a preacher's wife, and she always played every Sunday, and we all followed her. In the last 6 months, she has started playing like I've never heard before. She started playing like a musician. I mean, I always heard the preacher's wife who was playing for the crowd so we could all sing along and keep beat. Now she sits down at the piano and she's weaving like 3 or 4 songs together. I have to sit and listen. Oh, I heard a little bit of that. And it's this amazing thing that I've never heard her let loose before. What if that was everyone? What if that was possibility for everyone? That this isn't it. It's not over when you get this diagnosis. And I know everyone will say that, but do we act that way? And because of grief, because of stress, because of all these things, it's very difficult to act that way, to be really present for family caregivers especially. But it takes a toll on the professionals who get attached to their patients, and they have to kind of dissociate. And then the injuries come, and then the overtime comes, and all these. How can we? And my piece is a drop in the bucket of that issue, but how can we bring more presence to everything? I guess that's a fairly lofty answer on the soft side of things, but I just don't accept that we can't do better. And that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see us do better. I'd like to see us take the attitude that you never stop doing better. That's, again, that goes back to traditional martial arts. You're not, I tell people, you're not ever going to be good, but you're going to be better. I've worked with people who are the heads of 500-year-old systems, and they'll very openly say, I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to get it right. Lifelong martial artists, 80 years old, they're still trying to get it right. That's how healthcare has to be. We have to still be trying to get it right. We have to have the best places in the world and still be trying to get it better. If I could bring that attitude, that would be a wonderful legacy for my life.
Fantastic, Ben. I really appreciate it. It's such a positive and optimistic and inspiring and hopeful message. And I also really appreciate you being open and sharing your personal story. It's just really, I'm glad to hear. Again, obviously it's tragic that your mom has that condition, but that she's in a place now that, as you describe, is working out well for you all. And it makes me think it's fascinating. You'd be interested in a book I've just been in the middle of listening to an audiobook of. It's Daniel Levitin. The book is called I Heard There Was a Secret Chord. He's a neuroscientist, but he's also a musician and a sound engineer, music producer. And so he's got a lot of information in that book about how music can improve the lives of people with all different kinds of health problems. But there's a chapter in there on neurocognitive disorders and Alzheimer's. And it just made me think of that, because it's exactly what you're describing and having seen with your mom and her music over the past little while. So again, thank you so much, Ben. I mean, this has just been an incredible conversation about movement and safety and dignity, the ancient, perhaps somewhat hidden wisdom that caregiving can reclaim when we slow down and listen to the body. And I just find the work so compelling in that it doesn't necessarily ask caregivers to work harder, but it asks them to work smarter, more gently, and more sustainably, as you say, with wins all the way from the individuals, not only the caregivers, but the residents, clients, patients, but all the way through to the systems and the society. It's just such a wonderful project and vision. So I would really encourage, for viewers and listeners, anyone who's working in these kinds of fields, nursing, long-term care, dementia care, healthcare leadership, I would strongly encourage you to learn more about Ben's work through ElumenEd and Eastern Ergonomics. I'm going to put links to all of Ben's work in the show notes, so I'd really encourage you all to check that out and get in touch with Ben and just find out as much as you need to about his amazing work and just really inspiring projects. So again, Ben, thank you so much for not only the decades that you've devoted to protecting caregivers and honoring clients and residents and patients, but thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you, Michael. It was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll have to keep in touch for sure. And yeah, like I said before, it'd be great to get your program up here in the Vancouver, Canada area. And I think there's a lot of people that are going to be really interested. And so I'll definitely keep in touch with you and reach out and see if we can bring some of your programs up into our facilities up here.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Neurostimulation Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you found today's episode interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. It's the best way to make sure that you never miss an episode, and it helps us to reach more curious minds like yours. Also, if you think that today's episode might resonate with a friend, a family member, or a colleague, please share it with them. This kind of knowledge is better when it's shared, and you never know who else might find this information helpful or inspiring. For more details about Ben's company and his projects, please do check out the links in the show notes. I would really encourage anyone, particularly in these fields, who thinks that his approach might be something that could improve the quality of care in your particular setting. I think it would be great to reach out and just find out as much as you can about what he has to offer, because it just strikes me as so innovative and interesting in terms of the likelihood that it's going to improve the lives of not only the people that we're caring for, but us as caregivers as well. Also, if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please do put those in the comment section below. If you have any ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear about that. Your questions, ideas, and any feedback that you can offer certainly will make this podcast better. And finally, don't forget to tune into the next episode. It's going to be another exciting journey into the cutting edge of neuroscience, clinical neurostimulation, caregiving, interventional mental health, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, all kinds of interesting topics. So thanks again for viewing and listening. So thanks again for watching and listening. Take care, stay curious, and I'll see you next time on the Neurostimulation Podcast.